I'm Jackson, and today I will be presenting all of my research on Janet Cardiff. Janet Cardiff is an installation artist, but particularly audio installation. Cardiff was born March 15th, 1957 in Brussels, Ontario, so she's very local. During her studies in Edmonton, that's when she met her husband, and her first collaboration with him was on a film called The Guardian Angel. This film was pivotal. This is kind of what changed the direction of everything. This is when her work began to include more narrative sequencing, more experimentation with sound, and more movement. She earned a bachelor's in fine arts from Queen's University in 1980, which she was there focusing on photography and filmmaking. And then 3 years later, she earned an MVA, which is a master's in visual art, from the University of Alberta. In terms of stylistic elements, there's always an unsettling undertone to her installations. I'd say like maybe one or two don't have that unsettling element to it, but almost every other installation that she's worked on has this kind of ominous vibe that it makes you a little uncomfortable. But another thing that she, kind of does repeatedly is use everyday objects in her installations. Like examples of the ones that include everyday objects are Writer's Festival penis, the drawer in the Cabinet of Curiosity, and the mirrors in the Infinity Machine. She seems to work a lot with imagery and speakers of like various kinds as well. As for the places she uses, I have created two categories: space focus and object focus spaces. For example, the Carney is a very object focused piece because the room, like the piece is what's in the middle. The other side of the spectrum, we have Storm Room, which is definitely a space focused piece because there's no real main object. You kind of just experience the entirety of the room. I'm gonna start with my number one favorite, The Killing Machine from 2007. Whew. Okay, so this is mixed media and an audio installation. It's about 5 minutes in length and it's absolutely gorgeous. I made note of the change in lighting and I noticed how that kind of brings a different mood. Let's move on to The Murder of Crows. Now, this one was from 2008.
And that is a 98-channel audio installation, which includes speakers, keyboards, and chairs. And the duration is about 30 minutes.
In my notes, I mentioned that there were instruments used, but also that there was a female narrator and there is a story being told. Number 3 is the Alter Bahnhof video walk. But this is a video walk and it's about 26 minutes. Users are given an iPod and headphones and they are to follow a pre-recorded video and audio through this old main train station. I also did note that she tells a story of the place that she's in, which is really cool because it's kind of like a guided tour in a way, but super, like a lot more intimate and personal. So I think that was really cool. Moving on to the fourth, Forest for 1,000 Years is absolutely brilliant.
2012 audio installation. The duration is about 28 minutes. This happens in a forest.
It uses ambisonics, which is a full sphere surround sound format that was developed by a 1970s mathematician. Okay, it creates a sound that can be heard above and below the listener. Like it's like super, it's insane. I do note once again that she's always doing her, unsettling sound type of thing. It's almost always present during the experience. Like it's just consistently there. Last but not least, the 40-part motet, made in 2001, is an audio installation
with 40 speakers mounted on stands that are placed in an oval, and they use amplifiers and a playback computer. This is a 14-minute loop with 11 minutes of music and a 3-minute intermission. And dimensions are variable, of course, and the installation is currently depicted in Montreal
in this image. I did note that this one is very angelic in nature. Like this one is beautiful. Like it's just it's a beautiful symphony of multiple different voices. Each and every speaker has one voice assigned to it. So when you're in the middle of that space, it sounds so unified and as one, but you can get up and you can walk around and hear the uniqueness in every single voice, and that is exactly what Cardiff is trying to do. In terms of starting a project, and I'm just going to touch on her process here, Miller says that they are constantly talking about ideas, and if they develop them together, that becomes a collaborative project. They first figure out what's the best route to take, and then Cardiff observes what patterns evolve. They do many video tests and replay to see what interests them, and then Cardiff writes a script that'll be appropriate for the site chosen. I wanted to touch on the themes real quick in Cardiff's work. A lot of her audio walks, or video walks, include a lot of themes of memories, thoughts, and events. Reality and disturbance between real and fictive. That is very prevalent in her work as well, and that's kind of like the main point. Connections to the real world are a little steep here. You do have to think of world events, like historical things that happen, and when I try to make that connection between that and Cardiff's art, I do often think about Forest 4,000 Years. In her own words, because of the site of a forest being in Castle, we started to think about what this area of trees had heard over the centuries and work with the sounds in relation to that concept. As we all know, Castle was the site of horrific bombing during the war as well, so the site was very potent. Almost all of her work includes hyperbole as well, as there's not just one medium she uses in her work. In terms of stuff that does include hyperbole, I'd say a good example is the Carney 2010 and the Cabinet of Curiousness, also in 2010. There's juxtaposition with the man being shot and then cutting immediately to music. And in terms of the 40-part motet, I'd honestly say that the modern use of technology would make this a recontextualization rather than an appropriation. In 15 questions, we talk a little more about Cardiff's life growing up. She grew up in a rural area, as I mentioned before. Uses sound to impact people. We also find out that she hates flute noises. I think it's important to start off by saying that Cardiff says physical aspect of sound and the effect on the body is the main thing in her work, and that the narrative quality is not necessarily the most important aspect of the installation. Cardiff talks about how her and Miller work as partners, but they also work individually. Cardiff says, "We work individually on our own, but if I need someone to do camera work or help out in a way, then George helps out, and, vice versa." Alright, now moving on to the next segment. Why should Cardiff be studied? Audio installation is a visual and musical art medium. Well, it's not essentially musical, but it's definitely more related to sound, right? And I feel like that it's heavily neglected by the two art genres that they're kind of mixed with. It's not necessarily well recognized as a form of art amongst the visual artists. I also think that we should be studying her particularly as Canadians because she is a Canadian artist and she is local to Ontario, which is a huge deal.
One more point though.
The art industry is still very dominated by men, so highlighting women and female artists is still very, very important. Now, why I chose this artist. Sound installation is super cool. It's super funky. You get to play with sounds, but it's also visual in a way, and it's kind of like the dramatic and theater-esque elements of performance art. I really want to experiment with this. Super excited to show you the installation that I have put together. I really hope you enjoy the installation that I've put together. I did my fair share of research, obviously, as I included in the entire video, but I did also quite a good bit of experimentation. So I really hope you enjoy and appreciate the work that I put into this. Thank you so much for watching, and I suppose I'll move on to the installation bit now. If not right away, then I hope you sit tight and be ready, because hopefully it's going to be good.